Why are relationships toxic? One, do you think relationships are toxic?
It depends.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends on a person's background. It depends on the compatibility. And it also depends on how long they've been dating.
Okay.
Yeah, toxic don't really show in the beginning. It usually rears head a few years in.
Meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
I feel like toxic relationships, why they're toxic, I go along with that. Like, part of what you said, I also feel as though they are toxic because it depends on the person itself.
The person itself.
The growth. Mm-hmm.
No, it depends on how long It depends on how long they've been together for.
No, because toxicity is not just because I'm with you. It's just not grown with you. It's actually something that's picked up or it's developed over time.
Yeah. So I'll definitely agree with that. But it's just like, okay, whenever you go into anything, you're not perfect. Humans are not perfect. Whenever you go into a job, you might half-ass a job every now and then. Mm-hmm. Whenever you get in a relationship, you might half-ass a relationship. Mm-hmm. The reason why I said that it takes time for toxicity to come out and that you don't really find out in the beginning because everything is the honeymoon phase until you start dating that person for X amount of time. Then over time, you start like noticing different things that person is doing and maybe a pet peeve of yours, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think that in time will reveal all. Mm-hmm. That's why I say that.
I mean, I get that. I understand that part of it. I just think that a lot of times too, toxicity comes from not accepting as well.
Accepting what?
So, for example, we all raised a certain way. We have a background certain, like you said. I agree with that. I believe that the toxic traits are basically taught by what we're around, who we're around, and then that comes out. Now, when you get in a relationship that is healthy, and you're trying to better each other, for lack of a better word, but it takes two to tango. So if I'm a person that feels as though I don't have any toxic traits, like I don't feel like the way I was raised is the way as I was raised and it's right and A, B, and C, but I don't do a self-reflection on myself, that makes the relationship toxic because it's not meaning I'm not, like you just said, nobody is perfect in a relationship. Relationships are work. You're in the dirt. You got to grow. You got to understand. It's all of that. And that's why a lot of people I call it only the strong survive, because only the strongest can actually survive a real relationship, because real relationships are not butterflies all the time.
But yeah, like, okay. So if you're in a relationship, no matter if it's, so I don't understand when you say a real relationship, because like I just, when you say real relationship, is it, are you putting like a certain time on that? Like, what do you mean by real relationship?
No, I mean real relationship, like you're past the honeymoon stage. Where you're in the meat and potatoes. Like that's
I get
because
you.
Anybody can stay for honeymoon stage.
Yeah, honeymoon is like
it's great. It's everybody's happy, life is great.
But why is that? Like I never really thought about that. Like, why is it so great in the honeymoon phase and then all of a sudden it like kind of, all right, you see who I really am, and then everything goes to shit. Like, I don't understand. Because
I think a lot of people put on a facade.
I think everybody put on the facade.
You put up a let me rewind that. Your accessibility is easier in the beginning. And the reason why I say that is because you're gung-ho for 110% to be with this person, to make it work. So you're willing to do any and everything to make that work. Now, when you start to get into meat and potatoes, that's when like real conflict resolution comes into play, because everything is not going to always be butterflies and blue skies.
In the beginning, you're lying to your spouse. You're lying to your partner.
I think everybody
most of the
pretty
time
puts up a facade.
Most of the time, you put up a facade. You want to be on your best behavior. Yeah. You want to try to woo the person.
It's like a job interview. You're coming up with the best representative.
Yeah.
But the problem with representatives is that's not real life. So when you start to really understand somebody and understand like when life hits or when life gets the best of anybody, you have to be able to work with that person in that position, because honeymoon stages are not saying it's not going to be honeymoon stages or happy or whatever. It just shifts accordingly.
But I'm going to tell you what toxic is. Like, toxic is like you meet a person, right? And this goes for anybody. You meet a person and they put on a facade, and you get to know them, you get to like them, and you decide to get in a relationship with them. And then all of a sudden, once you get in a relationship with them, everything switches up. So that's what leads to toxicity. So like that can lead to toxicness.
So I don't believe that. I believe that first and foremost, people, you're going to see what you want to see in the beginning of a relationship.
Right.
If somebody is showing you something along this line, you're not paying attention. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, we all have these rose-colored glasses on in the beginning of a relationship. A person can show you who they really are. It's just the fact you're just not paying attention.
For example, like myself, I'm a messy guy. Like, I'm not, like, I'm disorganized. And on the other hand, you're very organized, right? So like, when we first started talking, when he was coming over, I'll try to make things as neat as possible.
Right.
But then once you got to know me, you start noticing that, hey, I can get a little messy sometimes.
Right.
So that's what I mean by that. Like, it can be that's just like a very insignificant thing, but it can be other thing that's that's more severe in a relationship, that it can be a no-go for some people.
Well, I feel as though that is where you have to really sit and think, are you in this for the long haul? Because realistically, let's be realistic, not everybody can keep up a facade for too long. So there's going to be things that are dysfunctional, that are not perfect, that are toxic, because they picked it up and brought it into this relationship, and it had nothing to do with you. It's just something that was brought in. But are you able to work with that person? Kind of like when I said in the last video, we all bring this bag. Are we sorting this out together? Or are we just saying, I'm closing my bag and I'm out of here because it's too much for me to sort?
So it's like, I don't think anybody on this earth can predict what can happen once you get to that next level with a person. Because after the honeymoon stage, you don't know what that person might do. You don't know who that person really is until, like I said before, until you move in with them and you start to really get to know them. So like, if you're thinking it's all green and rose petals and everything like that, and then like other stuff start happening, now you kind of caught off guard and everything happened, and it's like, what the hell?
Well, that goes back to what I was saying before, the storm survive relationships, because you have to have those conversations. So you may have thought something like, like, for example, you use the example.
I don't, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
But you use the example of messy, right?
Yeah.
So when I first met you, I thought you were, because you were military. I'm like, oh, he does this, that, and the other, and I know for sure he's going to be a certain way.
Yeah.
But when we moved in, it was totally different. Now, I could have took that and been like, I can't do this. That's too much for me.
No,
but I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I understand the aspect of, it's not a perfect situation. So there's going to be flaws, just like I have flaws.
Right.
I have to accept your flaws just as much as you have to accept my flaws. Because if I'm in this for the long run, then I'm in this for the long run. I'm not lying and saying something and then I'm not meaning it. Because again, how is this really a relationship if that's the case? Because it's easy for you to pick and choose, like, oh, well, this don't happen, I'm out of here. Because that's very easy for anybody to do. It's very hard for people to sit down and be like, all right, we have differences, we have two different understandings, but we can come to a middle and understand.